All right, don't be shy. Come up front for the last session on the main stage. The very much high expectations for this one. You may have heard of it. It was all over the news in the past 2 days since we made this announcement of this world premiere, which I'm going to talk about quickly before introducing our first speaker here. If you're like me working in cybersecurity in space, you may have talked with satellite operators trying to explain why it is important to embark security on space systems. And most of the answers we get from flight software engineers, system engineers, ground segment engineers is, I don't understand the risk. There is no risk. My satellite is very far up there. It's safe. Nobody wants to attack it. I don't believe you. Threats are just theoretical. They don't exist. Well, this has changed a lot since the last couple of years, and especially since February 2022. And one way to show that risks are real is to hack a satellite. And for the good, obviously, the purpose of ethical hacking is to point out, to identify vulnerabilities, to show that they exist, patch them, improve the system, make it more secure. This is the basis, the foundation of ethical hacking. It is not yet popular in space, also coming, but very much popular in other industries. I always take the example of automotive and Tesla. Tesla, Elon Musk, very famous for the hacking competition. He's awarding ethical hackers $1 million to find critical vulnerabilities in Tesla cars. $1 million for hackers to find holes in the system. In space, we're getting there slowly but surely, and this is today definitely an important milestone, world premiere, as I mentioned before. We had found ethical hackers that responded to the challenge of hacking a flying satellite. And this with the purpose to show to the space industry that the risks, the threats exist. It is possible to hack satellites. Some people out there with bad intentions do not follow the rules. They do not follow the guidelines, the standards. They think out of the box. And this is important to consider when you design a system. Now, with that in mind, we had this idea of hacking a satellite for security back in 2022. We also made some announcement last year, if you followed us on social media. Unfortunately, because of the war and the situation of Ukraine, we couldn't do it at CYSAT 2022. But the good news is that we are back this year with a demo on a flying satellite. And the issue when we had this idea was to find the satellite. And when we talked to people, who wants to give a satellite to ethical hacker for being hacked? Very few people responded, but we did find a satellite out there. It's called UpSat, and I'm here today with the UpSat Space Lab manager. I'm calling on stage Dave Evans. Please come up on stage, Dave, from the European Space Industry. A big applause for Dave, please. Super glad to have you, Dave. I started to present UpSat. You'll get into the details about UpSat, why it was perfectly suited to perform the first in-orbit demonstration of offensive security. You'll talk to us about the satellite itself. And then after that, once we have all understood what is UpSat, we'll call the hackers, the heroes of the day. They're right there from Thales. Yeah, you guys. No, there. To explain us exactly what was the demonstration, how they managed to hack the satellite and how they safely recovered it. Please, Dave, let us know what is UpSat, why it was a good use case for this demonstration.
The clicker.
It is right there on the stand.
So, thank you very much, Matthew. Let me just say that I am honored to be here today. As Matthew said, it's been a long haul. We tried in 2022. Yeah, it's great to see it actually happening. I'm not a security expert, so I'm an operations guy by training, I just happen to be the project manager for OPSAT Space Lab. But OPSAT Space Lab is something to facilitate industry, European industry, to help them test things out in space. My presentation, therefore, the presentation from Thales is great. I already seen it. And it's quite long. So I want to keep it short. And I can talk about OPSAT Space Lab for hours. But I only have 3 aims. The first one, I just want to tell you what it is. The second one, to give you some context so you can understand the Thales rather technical demonstration about what they did. And finally, give you the context of actually what happened. So to assure you that it's completely under control. Some of the press that we've seen, it's like, the ESA satellite was hacked, etc. No, this was, the doors were opened, they were invited in. What they did was still amazing, but it wasn't a hack of an ESA operational spacecraft. Spacecraft are all safe, etc., etc. So, more to do, let's try and start. Do I do that? Yeah, okay. Right, so that's what I'm going to try and do. First, what's OPSAT Space Lab? Just a little bit about the ground segment and the spacecraft, so you know some of the terms that are going to be used in the following presentation. A little bit of showing off mission results so far, but I'll keep that very tight. And then the context. The most important thing is the context of this exercise. What is OPSAT Space Lab? Well, there are 2 missions. There's one flying at the moment, OPSAT 1. The life-size model is by the ESA stand, if you want to have a look at it, if you haven't already. And we have OPSAT 2, which is kicking off now. But what is the Space Lab? They are the missions. Well, it's a service. So it's a service that ESA provides. And we have space elements, of course. These are the space elements. And each of them, the elements are like flying laboratories in space. So they contain very powerful units, much more powerful than usual command and control processors, which can be reconfigured. And they're designed in a certain way which allows the people to use the satellite with very little supervision. This is the idea. So we can do, put it this way, you can do things on OPSAT, you can do all the things that you're not allowed to do on your own mission. This is the way to look at it. All those things you dreamed of doing, it's possible to do on OPSAT just because of the way we built it. It's cost-free, so we don't charge a thing. European industry, institutions, space agencies, they're all using OPSAT to test out things. We don't judge the experiments themselves. Yeah, we say, let's use it. There's no bureaucracy. There's no contract. Yeah, you register, you can be online with access within the day. Okay, so this is always, so it's a fast, non-bureaucratic service. And we assume the risk. So loading up software, firmware from a third party to your spacecraft is something you wouldn't normally do. It's risky. Things go wrong. Yeah, they do. I mean, this is daily life on OPSAT, things going wrong. And ESA assumes the risk of doing these experiments. And this is why it fits cybersecurity quite well. That's OPSAT 1, just to give you an impression of what it really looks like. We launched 2019, so we've been in orbit for 3 years now. Since we opened up the lab, we now have 236 registered experiments. It's worldwide, so we have lots of, we have all the major primes in Europe. We also have a lot of international space agencies, JAXA, NASA, JPL, CNES, DLR, they've all experimented on OPSAT. EU Commission are starting. And, yeah, just to show off, we won the first ESA-led mission to win an international award, which is presented in Dubai in March. So it's also recognized internationally as well as in Europe. That's just a little bit about the thing we launched there. We were from Kourou. We're in a LEO orbit of 515. kilometers, dawn, dusk, so we're mainly in sunlight all the time. Now, how do you build a spacecraft where you can actually do cybersecurity experiments or any load stuff you haven't really checked completely? Well, you build two spacecraft. OBSAT is not one spacecraft, it's two spacecraft. One is something we're going to call the bus. That's because Thales call it the bus. And this looks after the payload. But it's not a normal payload. The payload itself is another satellite. Yeah, so there are two satellites, one which is looking after it, and the other one which can be used for command and control. In fact, the payload can do much more than the bus in terms of functionality. So for instance, the bus can't access the star tracker, whereas the payload can. The center of the payload is a command and control processor called the CEP. The CEP is very powerful for a command and control processor, so 800 megahertz processor with a reconfigurable FPGA on it. And from this CEP, when you load your software, you can do anything. Change the attitude, take photos, take a video, do some analysis from a software-defined radio, spectrum analysis, run artificial intelligence programs, etc., etc. Yeah, communicate with the ground. So you have all the access rights to the whole spacecraft from the CEP. And this is where the cybersecurity exercise takes place on the CEP, but the bus is always monitoring. Okay, just to give you an idea, that's OBSAT. It's completely packed. The bus is there at the bottom. This is mainly a GOMSpace, for those that know GOMSpace, CubeSat boards. And it has everything. It has the normal things, communication, power, DHS, etc., a GNSS receiver. Then we have a payload, and we have different payloads on board. Just going through, there's a camera, so a high-definition camera. Also can do video, an optical receiver. That's there. There's an advanced IADCS. This is what they'll be trying to control the attitude with. And there's an X-band transmitter, capable of doing up to 50 megabits per second downlink. So just by those figures, we have 256 kilobits per second up, one down, 50 on the downlink. You can tell it's not a normal CubeSat. Normal university CubeSat is about 9.6 kilobits per second, so 1,000 times less. And the heart of it is this CEP. That's the CEP with the FPGA and the processor inside. The ground also is very open. So it's open, but it's open to the outside, but closed to the inside. So it's completely physically separated from the operational LAN and machines inside ESOC. So it's a whole area which is built, dedicated for this sort of stuff. And we spend a lot of time adapting things so things can be done over the internet. So you can basically sit in your living room on your armchair and command OBSAT as it goes over Darmstadt, through the S-band antenna, and people do. And we provide different types of connectivity. We can give you an SSH connection directly to the spacecraft, or you can go through the CCSDS normal packets, or you can use raw packets. It's entirely up to you. We give you lots of different ways of doing it. You can interact directly with the spacecraft, or you can leave it all to ESA, to the OBSAT Space Lab team, and they will execute things and deliver the files afterwards, the products that your experiment had. This is also new. So we have lots of highlights. We have lots of AI, because we're flying TensorFlow Lite on top, on board. Reprogramming the FPGA. It's a very, very powerful technology. Nobody does it. Usually, we do it on a daily basis. Software-defined radio, so you can use sniff the RF environment as you're flying over different areas, etc. And internet, different experiments, etc., etc. And we have quite a few firsts. I'm just going to list them. It's not that important, but some of the things that have been done first on OBSAT. Not because OBSAT is a particularly powerful super spacecraft, It's because it allows the opportunity for people to do things they're not allowed to do on a normal system. Now, there's a barcode for more information. You see videos, pictures, how to become an experimenter. It's all there on the barcode. Okay, now the most important part of this presentation, to set the context. So what I want you to go away with is that OPSAT is specially created. The mission, the ground segment, the way we do things, the operations, and the space segment is entirely specially created to do dangerous things. Okay? So the ground infrastructure is completely physically separated from the operational missions. Yeah, and when we designed it with the idea of an evil experimenter. So we said, like, imagine somebody's going to load up a software to the spacecraft or a firmware to the spacecraft. What damage could they do? And what was completely obvious is there's no way in the world we could stop them. You just can't stop them. I mean, it may be malicious, it may be unintentional. It's just, you're not going to be able to stop them. So we concentrate not on prevention. We don't prevent this from happening. We concentrate on recovery. So when it happens, can we bring the satellite back from the brink? And this is what we've been doing for 3 years. So we're very good at it now, which is a good job. One example of this is we perform the onboard operations only in RAM. So everything you see today was done entirely in RAM. What does that mean? We have a file overlay. It means that once everything's done, to get out of it, we simply power cycle the SEP. Power cycle the SEP, and we go back to exactly how we started again. So as an example, how we protect the spacecraft. And ESA was in control at all times. It wasn't like we said to Thales, go ahead, try and crack open our system. No, we let them in. We said, here's the doors open. You can have direct access. And we went through the experiments with Thales, saying, oh, this didn't work. There were many iterations. It wasn't like it just worked first time. So it was an active sort of assistance, as we would every other OPSAT experimenter. So what do we get out of it? Well, it's important this was a very informative educational demonstration. Not just an education on our part, I think also for Thales, it was educational to do it on a live spacecraft, but also for my team and me personally, I learned a lot about hacking. So this is just for that, it was worth doing. But you cannot draw specific conclusions about the security of ESA operational missions from this. So the OPSAT flies are very specific, unique hardware and software. So we have Linux, we have Java, we have Python. These you will not find on a normal ESA spacecraft. And we designed it to allow third parties to load their own experimental software. And make mistakes. We once had a guy completely fill our disk with a log file. I mean, it wasn't his intention, but it happened. And we had to recover the spacecraft. So this is the idea of, this isn't something you wouldn't allow a normal mission to do. And we have this completely separate ground system. And because we have that completely separate ground system, we are allowing people over the internet to interact directly with a flying spacecraft. This is what allows us to do it. And the other thing that we want to say is we gave Thales a system image of the SEP. So we made a binary dump of the spacecraft image, the SEP image, and handed this to Thales. It's also something which would not be done in a normal situation, but it's something we do offer the experimenters if they're interested in backward engineering it. This is the point. We're confident enough that we'll be okay. So, having said this, so these are all the caveats that I want to go across. It's not a hack of an ESA operational spacecraft to ESOC. Having said that, we learned an awful lot. And this has made ESOC even stronger in our striving to become more safe. I think this is the important. Thanks to this sort of exercise, it is a way to improve the security of the operational missions. So with that, I'd like to thank Thales, first of all. They're a great bunch of guys. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. Also CYSEC, especially Mathieu for arranging this. It's also been great, and the whole conference is very well organized and everything. And this whole thing has allowed us, I hope on your side as well, but on our side, to learn very rapidly. Yeah, so it's a case of getting information and getting experience very, very quickly. And that has been our opportunity. And finally, I have to say thank you to my team. So they are the team. They're very young. I think I increased the average age by half or something. But without them, the team will also say, without these guys, it wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much. I'd like now directly to hand over to Thales. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's bring on board the 4 security experts from Thales. Please come on stage. And we can't wait to learn more about this security demonstration that you were able to perform. 4 of you. Yes, please grab the mic. You have a very detailed presentation, which we are very much looking forward to. Just one comment. Obviously, as Dave pointed out, the architecture on OPSAT is very different from a typical ESA mission, although it is very much more common with new space missions, and this is one of the points I like to emphasize. We see more and more missions flying Linux, having as-a-service business models, providing the opportunity for users to task the satellite, to upload their own software. And because of that, I think the demonstration is very relevant for the industry, because this is the future of space. All right, who is first?
I'm the first to speak.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to introduce you properly. So here we have on stage Guillaume Teissier. Guillaume here. Hello, Guillaume. Arnaud Gatignol. Hello, Arnaud. Quentin Minster. Hello, Quentin. And Brian Jouannic. Hello, Brian.
Hi.
Congrats again for the demonstration. The stage is yours. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for being present for this last presentation of the CYSEC conference. There's been a lot of communication on this particular experiment. So we are going to present what we did, and it is the first the first demonstration of in-orbit satellite hacking. So this is the agenda of this presentation. So I will quickly go through the team and the context presentation, although Dave already explained quite a lot the OPSAT platform. And then we're going to go into the technical details. So we're going to have 3 different point of views. First, there will be the regular user, the experimenter point of view, which is the good. Then the attacker point of view, trying to attack the satellite, and that's the bad. And then once the attacker succeeds in attacking the satellite, we're going to see what he is able to do, and that would be the ugly. And then in the conclusion part, we will have the key takeaways and the different mitigation strategies that can be put in place to avoid such scenarios. So the team, we were already introduced by Mathieu, but let's go quickly through the team. So we are a team of 4 cybersecurity researchers. We all work for Thales, but in 2 different cybersecurity laboratories. So my 3 colleagues, Quentin, Guillaume, and Arnaud, are working in Thallium, which is based in Rennes, and I am working in Thales itself, which is based in Toulouse. Apart from the geographical difference and the climate difference between the 2 places, there is also another difference, which is that Thallium is more on the offensive side of the cybersecurity spectrum, and we, Thales itself, are more on the defensive side. And that being said, a bit of context. So as Dave mentioned, it's important to remember that we did this in close collaboration with ESA, and that they gave us a lot of material to be able to gain access to this satellite. The objective was to assess whether it could be possible to hack a flying satellite, and if so, to raise awareness on this topic to make sure that real satellite the ones that are not used just for experiments, are properly secured, because a lot of critical systems depend on the satellites. The first point of view, the good and innocent experimenter. So let's say you want to try the OPSAT platform. You register to the service, and then just with Python script or Java programs, you are able to interface all the sensors and actuators of the satellite. So actually, that's pretty cool. So you can just upload your Python script and do machine learning on camera data acquired from the satellite. So to do that, for instance, let's say you just want to do a basic app that just takes a picture of the Earth. So what you would do is the 3 steps detailed in this slide. So you would first ask the ADCS, which is the attitude control system of the satellite, to point in a direction. It has to be available because other experiments might be using it at the same time. So when it's available, you point it toward the Earth, and then you take a picture. So that's a really simple program. And you expect something like this to happen. It's actually a real picture from the OPSAT satellite. So you expect to get something similar. Of course, not the same place, but something along this line. But then you get this picture. And you realize there is obviously something wrong. So it's either coming from your app or planet Earth is in danger. But it's more likely that it's the app that is not behaving properly. So you ask yourself, okay, what's just happened? Why did I get this picture? And that's when enters our second character in this story, which is the bad. And I let Quentin explain you the details of what happened.
So I will be presenting the attacker's point of view in this experiment. So first, our objectives as attackers would be to take control of OPSAT, or more importantly, its sensors and actuators. So beyond that, the actual goal of real attackers would be disinformation, tampering with the images returned by the camera, with falsified sensor readings, or disrupt, damage the equipment of the satellite to prevent it from fulfilling its mission. That's our first objective. A second objective doing this would be to stay undetected, and at the very least, to stay undetected up until the point where your malicious payload actually starts running. Because at this stage, you've had your effects. These are the main objectives. So this is an overview of the of OPSAT. So on the left part, you will have the bus, and below the CAN bus that connects all the components of OPSAT. In the middle, you have the CEP, the experimental platform. On this platform, it's a Linux system, so it runs different components, different services. Experiments run as unprivileged users on this on the CEP, and the supervisor on the right oversees that experiments. It starts the experiment, stops them. It provides them with access also to the sensors that are on the far right of the image. So those sensors, camera, attitude control, GPS, or the other kinds of sensors that OPSAT offers, experiments access those through the supervisor. And our goal is to take control of those, or at least give the illusion of control. So the first thing we had to do going into this was to attempt to stay undetected. So since OPSAT relies on the experiment rely on the supervisor to access the services, and that anytime you submit an app on OPSAT, it goes through a review process, a testing process, in which ESA would obviously flag anything that would not be desirable to run on the real satellite. We had to find a way to dynamically execute, for example, shell commands, since this is a Linux system. So to do this, we noticed that there was a communication channel between ground application and applications running on the satellite. That was our starting point to decide how we could run commands on the satellite undetected. And vectors once we have that communication channel, vectors that we could use to run commands on the satellite would be either to abuse existing features of the satellite, such as the common executor service. It's a service that exists on the satellite. It runs commands, that's its name. But it's kind of noisy. If you run commands through that, it will get logged. It will get flagged. So that's not a really good option. We could also have built-in a command execution feature in our app, but that also would not escape review. So it's not also a great option. So what we chose to do was to exploit our own app. We could have either made a vulnerable app that we exploited ourselves, but instead we chose to exploit a vulnerability in the NMF, the framework that ESA provides that allows our app to run on OPSAT. So we submitted basically a hello world app. It just does rather nothing. It's straight from the NMF examples, and we just modified one tiny line of code. We switched this value, this 1 that you see, it used to be a 2, I think. We switched it to 1, and that introduces a vulnerability, it exposes a vulnerability in the framework. This means this 1 value means that the parameter here that's defined is a blob of data that will be deserialized by Java. This Java deserialization is a known vulnerability, possible vulnerability in Java applications. So when an attacker can send attacker-controlled data to a read object method that exposes the Java application doing that to unsafe vulnerability and possible code execution. So to dive into this, how it goes is like this. On the left side, you have the ground segment with the ground application that sends its commands to the satellite, its data to the satellite. This goes through a process, through a proxy, goes into space. This is the mal-SPP channel here. This is an RF channel. And it reaches on the right side the experiment. And this is the code inside the NMF. Well, this is our app, actually, that defines the app, defines the parameter as we see on the second line with the 1 value that declares that this is a blob value. And the class on the top, the name, the simple monitor and control adapter, it's from the NMF. And the feature here is highlighted here in the code available from the NMF. So the application will receive the blob and then deserialize it with the read object method. This allows us, from our ground application, to send data that will travel through the RF link to the satellite, get sent to our application, and then cause the read object to execute shell commands. So with this, we have managed to create kind of a covert channel between a ground app and our space app. This allows us, through a regular standard NMF parameter, to execute commands on the satellite. Yet those commands would have escaped scrutiny because they are not present in the binary submitted to ESA. So this is an overview of what I just explained. From the ground, we send a command, or we send data that gets executed as a payload, malicious payload, in the context of our experiment. And I'm yielding the stage to Guillaume for the next part.
Okay, I guess you can hear me. Thank you. Okay, so problem number 2. You know from Quentin that we can run code as a Linux user because the SEP is a Linux board, and we can run code as an unprivileged Linux user. Each experiment on the SEP has a different Linux user associated with. So in this context of execution, we do not have direct access to the sensors, and we must go through the supervisor to access to the sensor and to modify their data. So the question, coming back to the objectives, is how to take control of them. One idea is that this is a Linux board, and we know that there is a root user that is really privileged on all the system. So this is one of our objectives, moving from the unprivileged Linux user to becoming root And once root, we know that we can do basically everything we want. So to find a way to become root, we started to find system configuration issues. Of course, we can find some of them because this is an embedded system, so you can find problems in the configuration that allows you to become root easily. You can always try to find one day, because in the space you cannot easily update system, so you can find some previously known vulnerabilities that you have to exploit and use them to leverage the path to become unprivileged root. Or you can search for and find, hopefully, some daemons that are running as root and that have been coded by someone, that has not been, the code has not been reviewed by peers, or you find something that has been homebrew. So you can try to find vulnerabilities in this kind of code. Thank you. Okay. Looking for such daemon, we have found that there is something really strange and at least that is very interesting. There is something which is called space shell root. So you have shell and root together. So we know that this binary is very interesting. And we took the binary and reverse engineered it. So we had no access to the source code. It appears that this binary is very interesting because it runs as root and it executes shell commands based on data that it receives. So for us, it's very interesting. And on top of that, it receives data from the CAN bus. So we had to look into this. So this is our experiment, X237. And our target is at the far right here, which is running under UID 0, which means that it runs as root. If we can find a way to execute command as root in this binary, we have achieved our goal. So this is an excerpt of the code of the binary that we have reverse engineered. We don't have access to the source code, but we can find a way to get something like this. As you can see, there is here a part that receives data, and it receives data from the CAN bus. There is the yellow boxed part, which is the part which just takes the data it has received and XOR it with a static key that is embedded into the binary. So if you have access to the binary, you have the key, and then executes what it has received and decrypted, kind of, and then execute it as a shell command. So if you know the key and you know how to send the data to the CAN bus, then you can send commands that will be executed as root. And the last item to put in the recipe is that the CAN bus can be accessed by any application, any user of the Linux system, which means that as our experiment, we can send CAN frames to the CAN bus, which will be then eaten by the daemon, and the shell command will be spawned. So, taking back the scheme from Quentin, once our payload is executing, then we can send CAN frames onto the CAN bus to get shell commands executed in the space shell root binary, which runs as root, and then we can succeed and solve our second problem, which was running code as root and take over the whole SEP. Next, as you know, we currently run under an unprivileged user, and we can send command that will run as root user, but there is still a problem, is that, for example, ESA can shut down our experiment at any time. And if we stay this way, then our experiment will be cut. And this is the branch on which we reach root command. So we have to move to migrate and to gain persistence into another process. So we have tried to find ways to do this. And either we can spawn a new process, like a new job or a new service, or we can try to inject into an existing file, for example, a binary or a library. And this is what we did because one of the library used by the supervisor is the NMF framework, and for us, it's a very good spot. Why? Because all the features are offered by the supervisor to the experiments, and the supervisor has a Java interface exposed to the experiments, and it interfaces with the low-level hardware of the sensors. So it's on the path of every experiment to the sensors. So for us, it's a good spot. And on top of that, the library that is used by the supervisor is a file which is writable by the root user. We have the ability to run commands as a root user. And the jar is simply a zip file, which means that we can replace entries in the zip file using our generated Java bytecode in which we have injected our payloads. And this way, every time the supervisor will reboot or restart, we can have our effects, and the effects will be for all the experiments. So this is what we have done. Here you can see the jar here. And we have injected the jar with Java bytecode, crafted Java bytecode in order to gain our effects in the supervisor. Even if our experiment gets killed, then the supervisor already have our effects in effect. This is a review of the 3 steps that we have seen. The first one is the Java deserialization vulnerability presented by Quentin. The second one is the vulnerability that goes through the CAN bus to go to the space shell route. And the third one is the fact that we can inject our crafted bytecode into the Java library, which is used by the supervisor. Now I'm handing to Arnaud.
Merci. So now we'll be talking about post-exploitation strategy. What can we do if we are a supervisor on the OPSAT satellite? We imagine multiple scenarios, but we focused on 2 scenarios. The first one is to alter the pictures taken by the camera, and that's why you can see a big green shard diving into the Earth in the beginning of the presentation. And the second one is to play with the ADCS sensor to override the satellite attitude requested by other apps. Also, by injecting the supervisor, we can it's a very good way to get persistence over the CEP environment. It's also possible to imagine different other scenarios, such as shutting down every services on the CEP, draining the batteries by maintaining a not favorable attitude of the satellite, or play with GPS coordinates, spying on other experiment data, and so on. The list is not exhaustive. But it's not as bad as you can think. Why? Indeed, as David said earlier in the previous presentation, ESA retained the control of the satellite throughout all the demonstration. Indeed, there is a component called the bus that is able to refresh or restart, rewrite the CEP environment completely, because the CEP environment is completely volatile, and we can restart from a trustable environment. The second thing is that the attack scenario built are based on very strong requirements. And these requirements are the following. The OPSAT provides a code execution feature. And that's not very common in the space. And the second thing is that ESA provides us, during the demonstration, different images of the CEP environment that allow us to find the vulnerabilities and also to try and to evaluate our payload on our side. At the moment, ESA is in the process to fix the vulnerabilities we found. So in this schema you know well now, you can see that the CEP in the middle can be completely flush by the bus, which is the component on the left of the schema. So from here, you know better than me, because I'm not a spatial guy, I'm more a cyber guy. Satellites are key elements in multiple critical systems. In telecommunication, in Earth surveillance, in positioning with Galileo, for example. And their compromission can lead to service disruption, for example, ViaSat last year, I think, unreliable data transmission, or data leaks. And that is especially true if your compromission remains completely undetected. So now the mitigation. I know they are completely generic, but we think that's a good way to build a system to have the security in mind when you start your project. You can do that by different manner. The first one is to build a threat model to know your enemy. The second one is to harden your system. You have a lot of benchmarks out there that can help you. You can also isolate tasks with SE Linux, for example. And also you can use the well-known paradigm, grant least amount of privileges. Why the supervisor is root? That's a thing. You can be helped with code review. Thales, Thallium, Thales and ESA Space also can help you to build better system with code review. And this demonstration has a very concrete aspect, that is that the red team approach helps you to build good system and is very beneficial to the spatial environment. The detection now, what can have been done? The satellite status can be monitored. The file system integrity can be checked. If you have this kind of check, the jar representing the supervisor will not be able to load. You can also log more and more, because it's a thing to detect an attack, but it's another thing to know where it comes from. And last but not least, the network monitoring, because in this case, if you have monitored the bus scan, you will have been able to detect our attack. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to ESA, because it was a great adventure. And now I think it's demo time.
Okay, so it's not quite over, because we have hot off the press. This is from yesterday morning. It was 5 p.m., and this is OPSAT. So the light blue cone that you see is the camera. And it's running right now, and in a few moments, our payload will start to execute, and this is the moment right now. This is our payload executing. This is faster than real time, but we are messing with the attitude at this moment. We are not really setting anything, we're just moving randomly. And this was provided to us by this is actual telemetry from the live satellite as it ran yesterday morning. This was provided to us by ESA, and this shows that the effect we had on the attitude of the satellite while it was orbiting. In a few seconds, then, the mission operations at ESA will cut our payload, so the satellite hopefully would start resuming a more normal attitude profile. So this is the effect that our payload had on OPSAT. Thanks a lot to the team at ESA again for their support round the clock to be able to provide you with these images.
All right, please sit down for a few questions. We still have a few minutes, and I'm sure I see some questions coming in the app. Maybe the first one for me, how much experience did you have with space systems, with satellites? Have you worked on satellites before, or was it a first for you?
Well, for most of the team, I guess you guys never worked in the space field, but I worked previously in Thales and Space, so I had some experience. But that was not really what helped us most to find the vulnerabilities, I would say.
And so we got, I think, a very detailed overview of what you guys managed to do on the OPSAT spacecraft. Can we have an idea, this is a question from the app, of how much effort, how much time did it take for you to really craft this malicious code, understand the system, and being able to disturb it from its nominal operations? Just a range of efforts.
So we started working on this in the middle of February. We didn't work full-time on this, but it was some level of effort, at least one person for a full month. and more like 2% for a full month, I would say. And the critical part here is being able to test what you do, because we can, from the documents, from the code that we have, we can design things. We can we can think of an attack scenario, but testing it and fixing all the little bits that fail at different steps along the way, that's what takes real effort.
How did you compare it, attacking a satellite versus attacking a terrestrial embedded systems? Was it harder, easier, different? What was your reaction?
I believe that the real difference is in the effects that we want to leverage, because here it's in space. So at the beginning we had some discussion or questions about what we can achieve, coming from the IT security side, at least. So I would say that the big difference is the effects that you want to achieve, not the way that you can get them.
I would say also another difference is that when you want to test your actual payload, it's much more difficult, because in this particular case we had 10 minutes windows to upload the exploit, and then we would get the results the day after. So it's a process that is much more, let's say, long than when you can attack a live system.
Yeah, maybe to explain like concretely how it works, because UpSat is not connected constantly. So I believe you had 2 windows per day. Can you clarify a bit what was the opportunity for you to place your attack?
So the UpSat passes over ESOC generally in the evening. The passes last for less than 10 minutes. And there are 2, 3 of them. They might not always work, because depending on the attitude of the satellite, communication might not be established. But that's the final stage, because before that, we were able, thanks to ESA, to try out our attack scenario in the ESA at ESOC. So that was the critical part to enable to build the attack, because testing it in flight, that was just the end to polish and make sure that we had the actual effects, especially the attitude one.
Yeah, we have one question here about the split in terms of the different phases of the attack and the level of effort it took. Would you say that the first part of reconnaissance and being able to really identify the target and understand how you're going to be able to craft the attack took you more time versus really implementing it and performing the attack? What would you say that was the most difficult?
Who takes it?
Testing. Let's see.
Yeah, I would say that the most time-consuming part, while not in continuous working on it, was the test phase, because we have spotted vulnerabilities and developed exploits. Not easily, but I mean, something that we do. And the part that was the most time-consuming was the testing on the lab, and next testing in flight.
And so we understood for this particular demonstration that you were supported by the UpSat team. What would you say would be your likelihood of success to work this demonstration as a total black box? Would you have been able to do it, or would it have taken you a lot more efforts? How do you gauge that?
It depends when you call black box, because obviously reproducing things, testing things is critical here. And without that access from ESA, that would have meant trying to acquire the representative model of the satellite, depending on how if that could be achieved, that defines the chances of success then.
One question I'm going to put up here on the screen, and not this one, sorry. Yeah, actually from John. The question is basically how replicable is this attack to other space systems? I think we talked a little bit about it, that it was very much different from traditional ESA missions. How do you think, what is your take on other potential attackers reusing kind of your strategy to attack actual satellites?
Well, I would say in this attack scenario, a big assumption is that you have access to the ground segment of the satellite that was provided by ESA. So we were testing, let's say, the onboard security, But then, in a real case, that would mean that you first hack into the ground station and then you hack into the satellite. So an enthusiast, even with good SDR capabilities, would not be able to do that unless he owns a complete ground segment.
Yes, you wanted to add something?
Plus, as David said just before our presentation, the OPSAT architecture is perhaps not the most spread one in terms of satellites, so it's kind of unique design, so we don't know about other designs.
And also, in 2021 at CYSAT and 2022, we welcome hackers that participated to the HackerSat competition in the US. And they mentioned, it was the French team actually, Solar Wine, they mentioned that they had a lot of trouble about the orbital dynamics to be able to really craft their attack at the right time and so on. Did you have to look into that at all?
No, our attack was not hopefully dependent on, let's say, orbital mechanics details, so we could launch whenever we wanted. We just had to wait for the passes over ESOC to upload the exploit, but we didn't have to dive into complicated rocket science to do that.
Another one from the app. People are obviously very curious about what you guys did. This one, so at which point after the attack could the malicious actor be detected if the objective of the attack is to spy on the satellite's experiment and not to execute malicious code? That's a tough one.
I would say when things start crashing because of malicious activity, that's, well, running unwanted binaries on a remote system is not risk-free. At some point, things will crash, or an experiment will do something unplanned, and the exploit code will crash and will get noticed.
And one more, unless we have some more questions for Matteo. You talked about it, about the mitigation strategies. His question is about the mechanisms in place to avoid an attacker to be able to pivot on the rest of the system. I don't know if you want to...
I think here we have to be on the CAN bus and to detect, to look for IOC, non-patterns, to avoid such attack. But you have to also know what's normal to avoid low signal and to avoid such thing. So the main thing here in the OPSAT, I think, design is to put something in the CAN bus and to look for different packet, different behavior, different things that's not normal.
All right. Any last word from you, gentlemen? Anything you want to add before we close this?
Well, we'd like to thank again ESA and, of course, CYSEC for organizing this challenge. It was really fun.
Yeah, you guys had fun. Yeah, again, a big thank you to ESA and the OPSAT team, especially Dave and the full team. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your support.